Before we dive into this nightmare, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story. It's a warning. And trust me, you're going to want to be here for what comes next. The sirens tore through the frozen night like razor blades, their red and blue reflections slicing across the glass towers of downtown Harrison City. Snow drifted across the empty streets, but no one dared step outside. Not after what had been found. Detective Mara Ellison tightened her coat as she stepped under the police tape, her breath frosting in the air. Ahead of her, the entrance of Vitex Insurance headquarters, one of the most secure buildings in the state, was swarming with patrol officers and frantic employees who had been forced outside. "Detective," a uniformed officer called out. "You're gonna want to see this." Inside the marble lobby, the atmosphere felt wrong, like the air itself was holding its breath. A thin trail of dark blood smeared across the floor tiles led toward a shattered glass door. At the end of the trail, under harsh fluorescent lights, lay the body of CEO Adrian Holt. He was face down, his hands stiff, his shirt torn open. The wound, deep, violent, and deliberate, suggested this wasn't rage. This was execution. Mara crouched beside him. "Forced entry?" "No," the officer replied. "Security says the killer walked in with his ID card. That means it had to be someone with clearance." Mara frowned. She'd spent 15 years tracking killers, extortionists, cybercriminals. But this? This was too bold. Too calculated. "Where's the card now?" she asked. The officer hesitated. "That's the thing. The killer left it behind." He handed her a small plastic badge in an evidence bag. On it was a name she didn't recognize. Mara studied the photo. A man in his mid-30s. Messy hair. Tired eyes. A subtle tension in his jawline. Something about the face made her uneasy, as if he wasn't staring into the camera, he was staring through it. "Run him," she ordered. "Employment history, home address, incidents, disciplinary actions. Everything." Another officer rushed up. "Detective, you need to see the security feed." They moved to the surveillance room. On the screen, the killer, Luke Marino, entered the building at 11:42 p.m. He didn't sneak. He didn't hide. He walked straight through the front door, swiped his ID, and scanned the room like someone checking off a list. Then, without hesitation, he slipped a black glove onto his right hand. "What's he doing in the building at that hour?" Mara murmured. The footage jumped. 11:46, Marino stood outside the CEO's office. He adjusted something in his coat, something long and metallic. Then the door opened. Adrian Holt, the CEO, stepped out. He looked tired, carrying a stack of documents. He barely had time to look up before Marino lunged. The attack was swift. Precise. As if practiced. Mara's jaw tightened. No rage. No panic. This was planned. But something else was bothering her, Marino's eyes. Even in the grainy footage, they were fixed, unblinking, almost determined. What was his role at the company again? Mara asked. A young tech analyst responded, Behavioral Risk Division. He analyzed client data for potential fraud patterns. So he understood people, Mara said quietly. Patterns. Weak points. A perfect profile for someone who knew how to stalk. A perfect profile for someone who knew how to kill. By dawn, Harrison PD had a full team en route to Marino's apartment. Mara led the raid. The hallway smelled of old paint and dust. Apartment 3B was silent, but the air carried a tension that made every officer grip their weapon tighter. On my count, Mara whispered. 3, 2, 1, breach. The door splintered open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. Papers were scattered across the floor. Walls covered in pinned articles. Photos. Maps. Strings connecting faces to places. Like the private war room of a man obsessed. And at the center of the chaos was a single target. Adrian Holt. Crossed out in red. Mara exhaled sharply. He'd been planning this for months. But something didn't fit. The other photos, employees, executives, clients, were marked with notes, dates, behaviors. Patterns of surveillance. Obsession. But most disturbing of all, victims of insurance disputes. People who had filed complaints. People who had been denied coverage. It wasn't just Holt. Marino had been watching everyone. A voice from the back bedroom called out, Detective, there's more. Mara hurried in. The walls were covered with handwritten manifestos. Phrases underlined dozens of times. Corporate parasites. People are dying and they don't care. The system must pay. And then, pinned above his neatly made bed. A list of future targets. 10 names. 9 still alive. Mara felt the hair rise on the back of her neck. This wasn't a murder. This was the beginning of something bigger. Just as she was about to leave the room, Mara noticed a small metal box tucked under the bed. She pulled it out, clicked the latch, and froze. Inside were dozens of photographs, taken from hidden angles, through windows, across streets. Close-ups of unsuspecting people walking home, eating dinner, playing with their kids. Every one of them was circled. But one photograph was different. It wasn't circled. It was framed. And it was a picture of Mara. Her blood ran cold. "Detective," an officer said, stepping into the doorway. Mara swallowed, her voice barely steady. "He wasn't hunting corporate executives," she whispered. "He was hunting anyone he believed was part of the system." She stared at her own face in the photo. "And I'm next." Detective Marcus Hale stared at the footage for the 47th time, but something felt different now, like the frame itself was breathing. The timestamp glowed on the bottom corner. 1:14 a.m. The camera showed a quiet Manhattan street, the kind where even the shadows seemed exhausted. Then, from the left side of the frame, a figure drifted into view. A gray hoodie. Slow steps. Careful. Too careful. Not a man walking home. A man rehearsing. Hale leaned closer. "That's him," he muttered. Detective Sarah Quinn shook her head. "We can't confirm that yet. Face isn't visible. Could be anyone." But Hale wasn't listening. He was already rewinding, playing the clip again, watching those silent steps. Every movement felt like a confession. The night before, they had found the second shell casing near the loading dock, the one they thought the killer had taken. Only it wasn't missing. It had rolled beneath a rusted metal grate. And on it, clear as a signature, were the faint traces of oil used for gun silencers. That changed everything. The murder of Brian Hale had gone from a possible mugging to a targeted assassination. Now they needed a suspect. And the gray hoodie gave them the first real face to hunt. Meanwhile, across the East River, the suspect himself walked alone. Luigi Mangione stepped onto the Brooklyn boardwalk, the early morning breeze pushing against him like a quiet whisper of guilt. Only he didn't hear guilt. He heard justification. Everything he had written in that leather-bound diary, page after page of anger, betrayal, and conspiracy, felt justified now. The world had ignored him. Corporations had crushed men like him for profit. He believed Brian Thompson represented all of it, the corruption, the greed, the hidden agendas. Luigi's breaths came sharp and shallow. He wasn't running. But something in his eyes said he wanted to. The phone in his pocket vibrated. A number he didn't recognize. He froze. Let it ring. Let it go to voicemail. "Mr. Mangione, this is Detective Marcus Hale with the NYPD. We're hoping to speak with you regarding an ongoing investigation." Luigi stopped breathing. Hale's voice continued, calm but with the weight of someone who already knew the answer to the question he was about to ask. "Please return this call as soon as possible." Silence swallowed the moment. Luigi didn't return the call. He slipped the phone into the trash can beside him and kept walking, faster now. Back at the precinct, Detective Quinn pushed a stack of printed credit card records toward Hale. "You were right about him. Mangione bought a train ticket to Philadelphia 2 hours after the murder." Hale frowned. "Is he running, or is he meeting someone?" "That's what scares me," Quinn answered. They dug deeper, phone records, purchases, online activity. The more they uncovered, the more sinister the patterns became. Mangione hadn't posted on social media in 8 months, but he had joined 4 private online forums under different names. The conversations weren't violent, but they were angry. Obsessed. Filled with long threads about corporate misconduct, political corruption, and an upcoming reckoning. "Look at this," Quinn said, scrolling through a recovered chat log. The message was short. "One day, someone will have to do something. And if nobody does, then I will." Hale felt the cold settle deep into his spine. "We've got enough for a warrant." But the judge didn't agree. Not yet. The evidence was still circumstantial. The motive wasn't clear. Then came the break they needed. A doorman from an apartment building near the crime scene, a man in his late 50s, slow-walking, soft-spoken, stepped into the precinct asking for the officer in charge of the murder. He looked nervous, like he wasn't even sure he should be there. "I wasn't going to say anything," he began, rubbing the back of his neck. "But I remembered something strange from that night." Quinn leaned forward gently. "Go ahead." The man in the hoodie. He wasn't just walking. He kept looking over his shoulder. Every 10 seconds, maybe. Like he was checking to see if someone was coming up behind him. "Did you see his face?" Hale asked. "Not clearly. But he had a small scar, right here." He touched a faint line on his left cheek. Quinn looked at Hale. "Mangione has a scar on his cheek." Hale stood up. "That's it. We're bringing him in." But Mangione had already crossed state lines. Detectives tracked him to a bus terminal in Philadelphia. They notified the local task force. Officers swept the area, bathrooms, platforms, All exits. Nothing. Then a station worker mentioned something odd. A guy in a gray hoodie bought a ticket to Baltimore. Paid cash. Left immediately. Hale clenched his jaw. He's slipping away. They notified Baltimore PD. They were ready. But once again, nothing. It was as if the gray-hooded man evaporated between cities. Yet there was something Hale kept noticing, a pattern appearing like faint footprints in fog. Every city Mangione passed through, Philadelphia, Baltimore, D.C., had one thing in common, corporate headquarters he had ranted about in his diary. Is he scouting? Quinn wondered aloud. Or planning something bigger? I don't think he's running, Hale said grimly. I think he's hunting. 2 days later, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source, an elderly woman in New Jersey who lived in a quiet neighborhood near Route 9. She walked into the police station shaking, clutching a piece of mail. I didn't know who to talk to. But this envelope, it came to my house this morning. The officer opened it and froze. Inside was a single page torn from a leather-bound diary. Handwriting slanted, uneven, angry. I will finish what I started. The reckoning doesn't stop here. Detective Hale's phone rang at 4:12 p.m. He drove to New Jersey without blinking. When he saw the letter, he knew instantly, this wasn't just a clue. This was a message. Mangione wants us to know he isn't done, he whispered. But something didn't add up. Why mail it? Why risk exposure? Why tell them anything at all? Quinn paced. Is he taunting us? Or is he asking to be caught? Before Hale could answer, an officer hurried in. Detectives, we found something else. He handed them a small evidence bag. Inside was a memory card, the kind used in cheap handheld cameras. Where was this? Hale asked. In the same mailbox. Hale inserted the card into a laptop. At first, it showed only static. Then the image sharpened. A dark room. A single bulb hanging from the ceiling. And a man standing with his back to the camera. A gray hoodie. The same careful posture. The same slow breathing. Then the man turned halfway toward the lens. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Detective Hale felt his pulse spike. Quinn covered her mouth. Luigi Mangione was alive. He was moving. He was watching. And now he was sending messages. But it was what happened during the last 3 seconds of the video that made Hale's blood run cold. Luigi lifted a piece of paper slowly into view. A location. A time. A single word scrawled beneath it. Come. The screen went black. Hale whispered, almost to himself. He's not running. He's setting a trap. And that trap was waiting for them. The sirens had barely faded when the world around the investigation shifted. What started as a murder inquiry had become something far more dangerous, a hunt for a man whose motives were sharper than the weapon he carried, a man who understood surveillance as well as those chasing him. Luigi Mangione was no longer simply a suspect. He was the dark figure in the blind spot of an entire city. Detectives Reyes and Calderon were back in the command room by dawn. Overnight, analysts had combed through hours of traffic camera footage, phone tower pings, and ATM logs. The city grid glowed on the monitors like a nervous heartbeat. One detail stood out, Mangione's last confirmed footprint was the Midtown garage, but his phone had pinged near the Hudson River hours before the murder, the same area he had scouted weeks earlier when following Brian Thompson. What was he doing there? Reyes asked, staring at the map as though it might confess. Maybe dumping evidence, Calderon said. Or meeting someone. Those words carried weight. The deeper investigators dug, the clearer it became that Mangione's obsession hadn't grown in the shadows alone. His journal hinted at conversations he'd had with an unnamed advisor. Someone who fed his grievances, someone who amplified them. The crime just became a conspiracy. They retraced the digital breadcrumbs. That advisor, they discovered, had never been a physical contact, only encrypted messages on a forum that no longer existed. Someone had wiped it clean, right after the murder. Reyes clenched her jaw. He's not just hiding. He's following a plan. A new pressure entered the case. If Mangione had been radicalized by someone, then whoever was behind the messages was still out there, and the possibility of a second crime loomed large. By mid-afternoon, the break they needed came from an unlikely place, the river. A jogger found a waterproof bag tangled beneath a pier. Inside were latex gloves, a burner phone, and a small notebook sealed in a plastic sleeve. The journal was unmistakably Mangione's. It was a continuation of the original diary detectives had seized, the one where he documented his resentment toward the healthcare system, his fixation on its executives, and his belief that someone had to act. But this new entry was worse. Far worse. One page listed names. Not just Brian Thompson. Several others, CEOs, legal directors, policymakers, all connected to the healthcare industry. It wasn't a murder. It was a list. And Thompson had been the first. Calderon exhaled. This isn't over. He's still working the plan. Reyes tightened her grip on the notebook. Then we need to find him before he reaches number 2. The investigation turned into a race. Homeland Security joined in. FBI analysts created a threat grid model to predict Mangione's next potential target. Every person on the list was moved under immediate protective protocols. News stations reported heightened caution, careful not to trigger a panic. Meanwhile, Mangione remained a ghost. Every hour felt heavier than the last. By nightfall, investigators chased a new lead. A black sedan registered under Mangione's alias had been spotted entering an industrial zone near the river. Storage units. Abandoned warehouses. A perfect place to disappear, or to prepare for another attack. Officers moved in silence. Tactical teams spread across the yard. Helicopters hovered at a distance to avoid alerting him. The wind rattled metal shutters like teeth. Then Reyes saw it, a faint glow seeping through the crack of a warehouse door. He's inside, she whispered. The team stacked at the entry. Shields up. Weapons drawn. The door slid back with a screech. What they saw wasn't at all what they expected. The space was empty. Except for a single folding chair under a hanging bulb. And on the chair, a phone, ringing. Reyes approached slowly, every instinct screaming danger. The caller ID said nothing. Just a blank screen. She answered. A voice came through the line. Calm. Controlled. Familiar. Detective Reyes, Luigi Mangione said, as if greeting an old friend. I've been waiting. Reyes motioned for the tech team to trace the call. They scrambled to set up equipment. Where are you, Luigi? She said. You're close, he replied. Closer than you know. Calderon signaled. They had the trace. The location was only 4 blocks away. Suddenly the phone clicked. A second voice came on, distorted, masked digitally. You won't reach him in time. The line died. Reyes ran before anyone could speak. The warehouse door slammed behind the team as they split into 2 units, racing toward the signal. The city felt too large and too small at once, every alley a threat, every rooftop a vantage point. They reached the building, an old freight terminal long abandoned. The metal door was ajar, as if someone had just slipped inside. The team advanced carefully. The interior smelled like dust and engine oil. Footprints marked the floor, fresh. Then someone screamed. It was Calderon's voice. Reyes. Up there. At the top of a metal staircase stood Mangione. Not running. Not hiding. Just staring down at them with an unsettling calm. One hand held a phone, the other resting on the banister. You shouldn't have found me yet, he said. You're moving faster than they predicted. Who is they? Reyes shouted. Mangione smiled, small, controlled, unnerving. You'll meet them soon enough. Before anyone could react, he tossed the phone. It shattered on the concrete floor. Then he turned and walked deeper into the shadows of the upper level. Agents charged up the stairs. Reyes led the way. They reached the landing, and froze. The room ahead was lined with maps. Diagrams. Photos. Every one of them connected to the names in the notebook. Every dotted line showed a target, a location, a time frame. It was a blueprint of a long-planned campaign. But Mangione was gone. A back door slammed, echoing like a gunshot. They pursued him into the alley, but he had already reached the street. A passing car screeched as he dashed across traffic. Officers chased him, shouting commands. Mangione didn't stop. Then, just as he stepped into the next lane of traffic, headlights washed over him. A delivery truck braked too late. The impact was instant. Chaos followed. Officers swarmed. Paramedics rushed in. Reyes stood frozen, staring at Mangione's still form. His final expression wasn't fear or pain. It was satisfaction. As though he believed the plan would survive him. Hours later, the medical examiner confirmed his death. But the case did not die with him. Not with the maps. Not with the encrypted messages. Not with the unknown advisor, still somewhere out there. Reyes stared at the evidence board long after the others left. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Rain tapped softly on the windows. There was one detail she couldn't let go of. On the last page of the notebook, the one found in the river, Mangione had written a single sentence. If I fall, another will rise. Reyes closed the file slowly. The city wasn't safe yet. The story wasn't over. And somewhere out there, someone else was already studying the same list. If this story left your heart pounding, just wait for the next one. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it.